Hi, this is David.
And I'm James.
And you're listening to UC3P.
Whoop whoop.
Welcome to UC3P, our eponymously named podcast on policy, politics, and current affairs. My name is David Raban, and I'm the production manager for what we like to call the main page. Today, we're back with our most popular miniseries, Naked Love. This episode is all about finding the perfect match. In the first part of the episode, you'll hear about a dating algorithm that was tailored specifically for students at the University of Chicago. In the second part, Emily Kelin interviews an anonymous Harris student who spoke about using a professional matchmaking service. In the last part, Olina interviews Chuck, a moderator for a Facebook page called Subtle Asian Dating. The episode is hosted by Ivanna Shevel and Katie James. Before we get into the interview, I should mention that we recorded this podcast last spring before we moved into our new studio. We only have 1 or 2 episodes like that left. After that, everything you'll hear on this podcast is brand new, and we can't wait to showcase to you all of that content. In addition, this episode is very focused on students at the University of Chicago. If that's not for you, feel free to skip this episode and listen back to our recent interviews with Keith Ellison and Marianne Williamson. Then come next week, when we'll bring you a more traditional interview on the challenges of practicing public interest law in a rural area. Now, without further ado, here's the latest episode of Naked Love.
This year was the first time that the UChicago community placed its romantic life in the hands of an algorithm created by Harvard's Computer Society and adopted by many other colleges in the U.S. According to the students behind the famed dating service, Data Match has led to many new relationships and even a marriage. So how does it work?
This is Naked Love, and we're back with a new episode. We are your hosts, Katie James
And Ivanna Shevel.
Today, we'll be talking about the best way to find a match. So you mentioned an algorithm. Tell me more about that.
The algorithm has actually been revised and kept a well-guarded secret by the Harvard Computer Society since about 1994. We do know that the questions are linked to personality traits and coded based upon that. We also know that the Harvard team has had some help from Steven Pinker. He's written The Better Angels Over Nature. When it came to the psychology of affection and how people communicate and match up and how to link that stuff to the personality traits. And then the way it works is that each college uses the service but adapts the questions to their campus culture.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. I did hear about Data Match from a couple people on campus, but I don't really know anyone who went on a date, since most people I know filled it out as a joke. What do you think?
Yeah, so most of my friends, myself included, treated more as a joke and never followed up with a date. The problem here is something that is a major part of game theory and many realist political thinkers is that you simply can't know the intentions of anyone you're interacting with. And of course, that's just a major problem when it comes to dating in general, because you're trying to build a relationship with someone who may have different intentions than yours, and it's just not going to work. The other problem is that a lot of people, particularly when it comes to a dating service like this, do actually have an incentive to hide their intentions because, for example, as is the case with UChicago, they fear that because this is not really a well-developed part of our campus culture, that if they're earnest and genuine about it and the other person isn't, then it's going to be really embarrassing and awkward for them.
Right. Well, that's very disappointing that the students at UChicago didn't take advantage of the algorithm, since it seems like it was really well tailored to the student body here. And I think it has a lot of potential for finding really good matches once it becomes more socially acceptable, and the students are ready to make their intentions be known. So good luck next year, UChicago.
Speaking of well-tailored, let's hear from some graduate students who will tell us about an online matchmaking service that promises to avoid heartless number exchanges and awkward first dates to find you the perfect match.
This is Emily Kelin. I'm here with another Harris student. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I invited you here because you recently went on a date with someone who you found on a matchmaking service. So could you tell us a little bit about just why you decided to start using a matchmaking service?
Sure. So I actually lived in LA last year, and an alum from my school actually works for this matchmaking service and reached out to all alums kind of needing people to sign up to have a database of people. And so I signed up, I think over 2 years ago at this point, and finally got matched about a year and a half after. So I don't know if that means I was hard to match or not, but it took some time. The reason why I kind of signed up for it was, one, it was a free match and free date. They set up everything. They set a location. They match you with someone, which is neat. And I kind of like the concept to begin with. It's just, assuming the best way to kind of meet someone, I think, is through other people or people that know you at least. And so that's not so different from that, assuming that the matchmaker does a good job of getting to know you and knowing the customer that she's working with. And so I signed up. I finally got a date. This was about in December. And before I actually got the date, she reached out to me to ask me some other questions. I had filled out a questionnaire with basic information about, what I see what I want in a partner and what my qualities are, all those basic things. But then she reached out and we had a Skype phone call and she got to know me a little bit more. And then I had the date, and don't think it was the best match to start with. I think a lot of things, even my deal breakers, he definitely had a few of those. So that didn't work out as best as I wanted it to, but I still enjoy the experience, and I think it's a good idea. Again, I think it's because assuming the matchmaker gets it right, like she gets to know you, it's a good idea.
So in talking about the matchmaker getting to know you and using that questionnaire, what were some of the questions that you had to answer? And did she bring any new questions when she talked to you in person?
It was actually a pretty basic profile online. So they asked you about the top qualities in a match. And so I had ambitious, passionate, driven, intelligent, some basic stuff, feminist, traveler, a little bit nerdy, I kind of like that, confident. So I had some of those. What else did I have in here? Relationship hang-up. And then your best traits. And that's kind of it. That's all that was in the actual profile. And you had some photos. And then my Skype call with her, she went into my past dating experiences. So she really wanted to get to know me, essentially, and see what was great about those, what went wrong, how it ended, what my longest relationship was, some of that. So I would say it was about like a 25-minute Skype call.
That's interesting, because I think calling it a hang up, first of all, for your deal breakers is sort of an interesting language choice. We're looking at strategic adjustment in this episode. So I wanted to know, do you think that you strategically filled out this compatibility questionnaire? Were there any questions that you thought about potential outcomes of those questions when you were answering them?
Yeah, I definitely, with the hang-ups, I mentioned that I indicated I didn't want anyone who's like a big gamer. In my mind, that might mean some things that aren't compatible with me and my personality. I think for me, that was an indicator of them being a certain level of socialness. So yeah, I definitely had some of those. And I actually went ahead and added a few more after the date, or she did actually, which was helpful as well. But yeah, you want to be strategic in terms of trying to make sure that you get a decent match or someone that is compatible.
So do you think that the questions that you were asked were good measures of compatibility in general, even if it didn't necessarily work for this date?
I do. That's actually a good question. I do think they were, to a degree. I think there should have been more questions in terms of like your views on certain things, or questions as in like, what would you do in certain situations? Things of that nature to bring out some more understanding of your personality, I think would have maybe been helpful. And I think she also came into the Skype interview with someone in mind already without really getting to know who I was, just based on that questionnaire. And I don't think you're right. I don't think the questionnaire was great in terms of matching people just based on that. I think, again, it really requires the matchmaker to get to know her customer and get to know, the people that she's matching them with. And I don't think that that was great with just the questionnaire, because otherwise, why not just use an algorithm at that point? There has to be some other additional level that you can't get from just an algorithm that can match you based on, what you indicate in your profile, if that makes sense.
So you were able to be in the database for free through a friend. It is pretty costly to use the service, and there is also a charge for remaining in the service beyond that free period in the database. So can you speak at all about how the pricing is set up and whether or not you think it's meeting the demand for this? Is it priced appropriately? Is it worth someone paying for it? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of strategy that goes into that too. So to start with, I think it's about over $1,000 per month if you're a customer. And that means you have a guarantee of 4 matches you're working directly with a matchmaker. And then someone like me, who if I just wanted to remain in the system, I get, again, that one free first date. And then I think it's about $50 per the year to just stay in the system. That doesn't guarantee any matches or anything of that. So that's kind of tempting. Why not? It's nice to have someone just set up a date for you and just go to a location and meet someone. That's kind of nice. I think it depends on who you are, right? If you're the type of person who's extremely busy and like really just doesn't want to deal with Tinder or any other online dating platforms and really talking with someone. And again, if you have a good relationship with a matchmaker that you think really knows you, I think that's a good outlet, but it's cost-benefit analysis for you, and whether you think that's really worth it. For me at this point, definitely not. I think there are other avenues that I'm a grad student, so hopefully that will work out for me.
As China's role grows greater on the global stage, you want to stay up to date on the issues most pressing to China both domestically and internationally. Check out the Just China podcast for in-depth analysis on recent headlines and investigative reports on Chinese matters that affect our globalized world. We are Just China. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy your podcast listening.
So what stood out for me is when she said, why not just use an algorithm? Because it did seem that the questions were at surface level and didn't seem to provide much more insight into her personality or what she was looking for than an algorithm would.
Right, but at the same time, algorithms might filter out people you would actually be interested in real life based on traits or parameters that are a little bit too mechanic for my taste.
That's true, but not necessarily a bad thing, because people who use services like this are usually really busy, and it's just not realistic to be looking at every possible option out there.
Okay, I do see your point, but the one thing that still bothers me is that I just don't think that matchmaking that depends on questions where people have to evaluate themselves is going to be accurate or end in really good couplings.
I totally agree with that, because remember that people use strategic adjustment, which means they adjust their behavior to maximize their benefit. So when it comes to dating, they lie or embellish the truth to make the profile they think will present them to others in the best light.
That actually reminds me of this other dating platform that I recently found out about where you don't have this problem because it's actually your friends that are building your profile. Let's hear from Olina, who will tell us more about the Facebook page called Subtle Asian Dating.
This is Olina Liang. I'm here with one of the moderators of the Facebook group Subtle Asian Dating, Chuck. Hi, Chuck.
Hi, my name is Chuck, and I'm one of the moderators for Subtle Asian Dating.
For this episode of Naked Love, we're focusing on different matching algorithms for dating. So, Chuck, I will start by asking a question about you personally. What do you think is the best way to find love? Like, have you used any apps? Do you rely on meeting people in real life?
Personally, I don't really rely on apps, and I think that meeting people organically, like through real life, is much better than dating apps. But I also think that dating apps are like super useful in helping you connect with a lot of people, but sometimes it becomes way too much if you get like too many matches or something. So I still think like meeting people in real life through like events and stuff is like much better.
So we know that there's all kinds of apps and sites out there, like Tinder. Why was that started?
When Subtle Asian Dating was started, we were created, like we branched off from subtle Asian traits because we wanted like to create a similar space for Asians to talk about their dating experience. It wasn't necessarily created to be like a dating app, and so to say, but more to like talk about the Asian dating experience.
Okay, so when you guys started, you had that vision in mind, right?
Yeah.
And it's not really like that right now.